Now I'm sure you're all dead scared, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be back at InnoTown. It's a pleasure, but I'm also a little bit worried. Because you know that the worst thing that can happen to a professor is when you have somebody in the audience who say, "Hey, Prof, I remember very well what you have said the last time. So I hope you have forgotten everything." And then we can start with a clean plate. And this is the reason why I've called my presentation "The World in Reset Mode." Because somehow the worst thing that can happen to all of us is when suddenly you are looking at a computer, you get a blue screen, and the computer tells you, "System error, please save what you can, then reboot." And the world is in system error. The only problem, we don't know where is the reset button. So I'm going to try to show you one or two things about it. First, is it a recovery? You are at a stage of the conference where you are fed up with numbers, so I'm going to go very quickly. This is Europe. What you have to keep in mind, number one, it's getting better. Number two, every country seems to be improving, including Russia. Number three, one of the fastest economies in Europe is Spain, 3% growth. Spain did not have a government for 9 months. Now, of course, there is no correlation. This is what's happening with America, 1.9%. It will improve. You know, first quarter always slow because of the snow. Then you are looking at Latin America, not very good. And this is a drama, in my opinion, Brazil. And this is Asia. And this is picking up. So these are the numbers which we have. It's good news. It's getting better. And everybody is a bit more optimistic than in the past. The real question is, can we trust those numbers? Is it real? And the first thing you have to know is that the GDP only looks at things that can be monetized, where you have a monetary transaction. And John Maynard Keynes one day said the following. He said, actually, never marry your housekeeper. It brings the GDP down. If you can convince your spouse to clean the house free, of course. So this is one of the first problems. The second one is what he called also the animal spirit. Take a company like Samsung. Samsung, they missed the launch of the Note 7. Samsung, the president is in jail. And Samsung, the share price is to the top, increased by 25%. Nobody understands how this is happening. Tesla, one of the contributors of this conference, shows how much expectations are important. This is our sales compared to Ford. This is the production of cars compared to Ford. And the market capitalization is higher than Ford. So it shows you that the market is not only looking at real things, but about expectations. And one day a CEO of a company, when I was discussing things, told me the following: please don't confuse me with facts. A lot of the things today are not really related to facts, and this is what we are going to see. The first thing is assessing the situation. Why are we there? What has been happening? Clearly, you have to use Keynes again. And Keynes was misunderstood. Whenever you had a crisis, Keynes says the following. Number one, you print money. Number two, with the money printed, you build something, especially a dam, if you can. Number three, with this, you give wages to the people, and with the money, the people will go in a shop and they will buy something, and the economy will return to growth. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Keynes' theories in 30 seconds. What usually takes me about a year to teach at the university. But here, you know the essential. You don't need to know anything else. What have we done? We have printed money. We have bailed out the government and the banks. And that's what has been happening, and then the money went backward. And I think this is one of the big problems we're having today, is that suddenly the money did not go where it belongs, actually, which means to the real economy. If with all the money we have printed, it would have gone to the real economy, then probably we would have inflation, not deflation. And this is one of the things we are looking today. So we have to be careful about what's happening. And basically, if I would summarize, we are in a world where we are cash rich and investment poor. What does it mean? It means that the monetary policies have been expanding. We have been printing money like confettis. The budget policies have been contracting. We have been reducing everything we can, and this has led to schizophrenia on the market because people suddenly did not understand anymore, where are we? And the big news today is that for the first time, we are discovering that we have a bit of inflation, good news. You know that inflation can be defined as when you are paying 30 euros for a haircut, which used to cost 20 euros when you had hair. So basically, we are in a difficult situation. So what's happening now? Good news. We have President Trump's magical mystery tour coming. And you may remember, this is the title of a Beatles album, 50 years today, huh? 50 years in June. Remarkable. What does he say? Trump says the following: to get out of the mess, I cut corporate taxes down to 15%. Number 2, I deregulate banks and administration. Number 3, I invest massively in infrastructure, $550 billion, $1,000 billion, depending on the day of the week when he's speaking. And finally, defense spending plus 10%. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Let's see what it means. Corporate taxes, I think is correct. Getting down to 15%, they are 35%. This is crazy. Number 2, border adjustment, trying to push exports, penalize imports. I don't think it will go through the World Trade Organization. No worldwide taxation, but a tax amnesty, 8.7% if you bring the money back to the US. Full expensing, this is interesting. If you invest, you can amortize in 1 year in capital investment. This is interesting. And the last one is you cannot deduct interest on loans, etc. Altogether, some good things, some bad things, a bit everything is in it, but this is quite interesting. The real problem is, do we have compatibility? What about the rest of the world? What about the tax revolution we see in the OECD, in Europe? Where it's territorial reporting, which means you report your taxes in the country where you make the money, and not in a country like Luxembourg, of course, not Switzerland, but Luxembourg, and equality of treatment, etc. But nothing is said on competition on tax rate, which means everybody will continue to compete on tax rate, the British, and also the Americans and everybody. We will harmonize, but not the tax rate. This is very important. And the question is, what will the Americans do with FATCA? They did not sign it. With automatic exchange of information, they did not sign it. So we are in a very strange situation, which is going to have a big impact on every company in the future. And of course, with banks and administration regulation, the president has said, I want to simplify the Dodd-Frank Act on banks, 7,000 rules, 600 regulations, which are costing about $743 billion for companies. Huge thing. One of them, the so-called Volcker rules on how banks are investing their own money, has 297,000 words. 297,000 words long. How do you survive that? To give you a comparison to this, ladies and gentlemen, the New Testament is 181,000 words long. And it gives you a lot more hope. And then there is spending on infrastructure. That's where you are in Norway, 3.5%. This is where the rest of the world. And I think it's a good thing because it is one of the ways to make sure the money goes back into the real economy. If you look at the US, the street, the sewer, the water, the power is between 24 and 29 years. You know, the story was that if you want to test a car, you drive it for 1 week in New York, and if it survives New York, you can go everywhere. So basically, people know that investing in infrastructure is highly important. Here it is. And we have a gap of about $1 trillion around the world in this. And that's why Norway is doing some very good job here and has to be pursued. Let me remind you, the big advantage of infrastructure is, number 1, you are investing for your children. Number 2, this is locked in a country. You know, when you are doing a tunnel or when you are doing a bridge, the Chinese will never take it away from you. They may manage it, but they will leave it there. The induced impact is enormous on the rest of the economy. A lot of people are working on it. And what is very important here, it gives jobs to the blue collars and the white collars. A good economy provides jobs to everybody, not only the highly educated people, everybody. And that's what infrastructure is doing, so this is a very good news. The virtual circle of the president is to say, I am going to increase the demand, inflation will increase, I don't care, interest rate will increase, the dollar will increase, so far so good, and of course the debt will increase. And the question is how much debt are they going to be able to have in the United States of America? And the next question is, of course, actually, should we worry about it? And if you want to have the answer, you go back to President Trump, because he has been pretty clear on that. And he said the following about debt. Number one, I am the king of debt. I do love debt. And he added, I love playing with it. At least it's clear, huh? Can't say he didn't tell us. So basically, the next one is we have a number of global uncertainties in the pictures now. The first one is obviously globalization, slowing down. As you know, NAFTA and TPP and the World Trade Organization are shaky today. They want to renegotiate everything. And this is a problem because if you just take the Brexit, and a lot of people do not realize that, you take the Brexit, when the UK goes out of Europe, it's the equivalent of the GDP of the 20 smaller European nations which is going out of Europe. I think this has a huge impact on the globalization process, especially in Europe. And if you are looking at our friends in the United Kingdom, and you look at the Brexit agenda, there are 4 periods of 6 months each. The first one is a withdrawal, you know, going away. The second one, 6 months, the future of the relationship, 6 months of negotiation. The third one, the transition period, again 6 months of negotiation. And the fourth period is ratification, 6 months. Doing all the process in 2 years is going to be probably impossible. I come from a country, Switzerland, where we negotiate with Europe a process similar. It took us 10 years. So there are very little probability they will make it. But what it will mean is more administration and more complexity for everybody at government level, but also for the companies. This is a big challenge also in the population. Here you have the little guy who was saying to his wife, should we get out of the European Union? Answer of his wife, why? We got in. So a lot of people in the UK never realize they have been in Europe, so that simplified the process. Oil price, you are very much concerned in Norway about oil price. There are 2 things you have to keep in mind. The downward pressure is, number one, the American exporting now shale oil. The renewable, 60% of the new investment are in renewable, a lot of it being subsidized, and the stocks have never been so high, 278 days. What is putting the pressure up is economic recovery. This is fine, and it is going to happen probably. The discovery of new fields have never been so low because of the price being down. We have never been so low in discovering new fields, and that's why it's good that Norway is investing now massively in trying to find new fields in the Barents Sea and everything like that. And the OPEC deal, of course, between OPEC, Russia, and the rest. We are at 55. Probably the objective for everybody is to go at $60 a barrel. Almost everybody will be happy there. And I think we will get there soon or later. The next question is, who has money, in case you are interested? Who has money today? If you are looking at the foreign exchange, current foreign currency reserve, this is Norway. You don't have a lot of them, but you don't need it. I mean, so you are okay. This is the rest of the world, China. What's interesting there is that China used to be about $4 trillion 18 months ago. So they have used a lot of their money. We will see how. And then you are looking at the other countries of the world, which are basically India, Russia, Korea, Taiwan, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil. Altogether, we are speaking about $5.4 trillion in money in foreign currency reserve. That's a lot. If you are looking now at the other one, it's a sovereign wealth fund. And here you have 2 big blocks. The first one is obviously the Arab world, with ADIA, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, being the largest one. The second big block is China, Hong Kong, with a lot of money there. And you have 2 independent players, the largest one being obviously yourself, with $922 billion, and then, of course, Singapore. Again, you take all that together, and you get about $5.5 trillion in money available. That's a lot of money, but that's not all. You continue to go around, and you look at central banks now. They have been printing an enormous amount of money. If you are looking here, we are now at $17.6 trillion on the balance sheet. Again, this money is standing there, and everybody is going to ask, what are we going to do with it? And then we go with Europe, with the Bank of Japan, the Swiss National Bank, still printing money, while the Federal Reserve has stopped. So here we have a difference of strategy between them. Companies, of course, many global companies are submerged with cash. This is the equivalent, cash and cash equivalent on the balance sheet globally. These are 50 US companies have together $1.1 trillion of cash available, and 5 US tech companies have half of that. So here we have a concentration of money in the technological companies in the US. And what is even more interesting, you see the largest one is obviously Apple. And then you get Microsoft, Alphabet, Cisco, and Oracle. And what is even more important is to find out where is the money. And then you find out that 93% of the cash of Apple is outside the US, and almost the same from Microsoft and Alphabet. And that the Obama administration was thinking about $1 trillion of profit of American companies are sitting outside the United States of America and not returning because of the corporate tax rate. And we are going to see how they are going to use this money. And then finally, the people are hoarding cash. We have had negative interest rates, so people start to accumulate money and they put it at home. So what can you do with all this money? I'm going to tell you. With 200 euro banknotes, if you put them in your attaché case, you can have $2.4 million in it. Ladies and gentlemen, if at home you have a large bed, you can put $100 million under your bed. You should always have a large bed at home. It's always useful. In your hotel rooms, when you are back, you can put $11 billion in it. And people have been accumulating cash because they didn't want to pay negative interest rates. This is with 200 euros banknotes. I come from a country where we have 1,000 Swiss franc banknotes, 5 times higher. So you imagine what we can do with that. So we had a totally different approach to how people would invest. And definitely, it was the following: the Nobel Prize goes to Mrs. Jones for keeping her savings at home. And for many years, keeping your savings under your mattress was the best investment. So, big question now, who owns what? What are we doing with all this money? And the secret is the following. We have a revolution in corporate ownership. The first one is a result of all these mergers and acquisition, consolidation. We have never seen so many companies buying each other, simply because this cash is available and they don't want to bring it back to the US. The M&A have been $3.6 trillion during the last year, the biggest year ever. Keep in mind, M&A stands also for murder and assassination. You buy and you kill. The second big revolution is obviously corporate ownership. I mean, we have all these emerging economies, companies, new names, new brands coming on the market, and they don't only grow by internal growth, they start to buy companies. They buy companies in Europe, they buy companies in the US, they buy companies everywhere, and this is changing the ownership structure of the market. And then you have to ask yourself, how long, therefore, does a company live? In 1958, a company would live on average 61 years old on the S&P. Today, 18 years. Every 18 years, a company disappeared, etc. This is the average life. And then the McKinsey think that in 2027, which means in 10 years from now, about 75% of those companies in the S&P will have disappeared, merged, bought, bankrupt, you name it. So companies are living much less longer than we do. And we will work in many companies just because of that. The revolution in corporate ownership is also the sovereign funds, with the ability, as you have in Norway, to buy into companies, a lot of companies. If I take my country, among the 5 largest investments of the Norwegian government funds, we have Nestlé, Roche, and Novartis. So actually, Nestlé is much more Norwegian than we think. Congratulations. And then the next one is a bank. The banks are printing money, and then they start to say, how do I spend it? And some of those banks start to buy shares of company. The Bank of Japan is buying shares in 200 of the 225 companies of the Nikkei index. And the real question is, number one, how do they vote at the shareholders' assembly? What's their position? Number two, is it done in full transparency? Do we know what they are doing? And I'm not quite sure that the transparency impact is very big. One day, this is Alan Greenspan, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve. He is being in a hearing of the US Senate. The US Senator at the end of the hearing is telling, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I think we have understood everything. And then Alan Greenspan is saying the following, Mr. Chairman, if I seem unduly clear to you, and then he had, you must have misunderstood what I said. You really have to be the chairman of the Fed to say that to a senator, huh? Let's move to what you have been touching a little bit, which is technology becomes intelligent and is going to change completely the model, the business model. And what you have to see is the globalization and technology together. What we have done in the past is offshoring, globalization to have access to cheap manpower, China. Then we wanted to have access to cheap brain power, India, call center and the rest. Now it's going back home because we want to have access, and we have access to cheap machine brain power. So a lot of the factories which were gone outside are coming back to the US and to Europe. But this has a very big impact on the qualification and the talents of people. This is a little guy which is being interviewed by the HR manager, and the HR manager is telling him, we are looking for someone with your exact qualification. And then he had, but a robot version. And this is happening now all the time. And this has a huge impact on the globalization process, because when we have put the factories in Asia, in Latin America, and elsewhere, we have been killing blue-collar jobs in Europe and the US. Now the factories going back from Asia, let's say, to Europe, they are not creating blue-collar jobs. They are creating white-collar jobs. They are highly automated. They have made jobs for computer scientists, engineers, but not for the blue collars. Which means that on one hand, we are here social unrest, because people say, I lost my job, now the factory comes back, I don't find a job. But you have also an interesting process of early desindustrialization in Asia and elsewhere, because people had a factory, it stayed 10 years, and now it's going back. And this is creating a lot of unrest in the world economy. And therefore, people are questioning, what robots are doing. Are they outperforming human beings? You could say that because now a robot is a world champion of chess, a robot is a world champion of Go, a robot is a world champion of poker, which is a huge achievement, because in poker, you have to lie. Up to now, we were the only one to be able to lie correctly. Now we have machines who can lie better than human beings. This is a tragedy. So we are going to have those robots everywhere, everywhere. And the big question, therefore, is what is the impact on salaries? What is the impact? If you are looking a welder, welding, in the US, $26 an hour, a robot can do the same job for $8 an hour. Ants. Bill Gates come and say, in this case, we have to tax them. And he's not entirely wrong, but there is a very big problem with taxing robots. And the very big problem is the following. What is a robot? Is it an android? Is it a computer program? Is it a machine? What is a robot? And as long as we cannot define what is a robot, it's going to be very difficult to tax them. And of course, are we vulnerable to them? Because the big advantage of robotics is that they are fast reprogramming. They can reprogram themselves every day. And ours, we are not fast reprogramming. We have a slow biological evolution. To reprogram ourselves, it takes a generation. And this is one of the biggest disadvantages we have compared to robots. But we should also be aware that robots themselves are vulnerable. They are vulnerable because they do have competence, but they do not have comprehension. The lousiest of the chess players knows number one is playing chess and number two is lousy, which is not what a robot is doing. He has no clue. And then for those who are really worried that the world is going to be taken over by the robots, keep in mind that we have with us the ultimate weapon. And this ultimate weapon is called the plug. Unplug them. Because they are all the victim of the second law of thermodynamics, which means if they don't have a constant input of energy, they just stop. And this is important for the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, a new mindset is emerging today, which will define competitiveness. And one of the biggest revolutions we have is really this new generation, the millennials, coming into the picture. They are characterized by meism. They are the center of the world. They want self-fulfillment. They are a little bit narcissist. This is a generation of the selfies. They spend their time taking pictures of themselves. When I used to go on holidays, I was taking pictures of the monuments. Now they go on holidays and they take pictures of themselves. They could save on the trip. They are escaping reality. The latest statistics are the following. Today, they are watching a screen, whatever is a screen, for 10 hours and 30 minutes a day. You take away 7 hours and 30 minutes for sleeping, they are confronted to reality only 6 hours per day. Do they meet a human being? Do they meet a traffic jam? Something real. Most of the day, it's not real. And this has an enormous impact on the way they are thinking. The second thing is that they have little affiliation, political or religious, but they are concerned by the state of the world. They want to change, they want to improve the state of the world. And they will certainly agree with the statement of Henry Ford, who said one day, actually, a business that makes nothing but money is a poor business. I think this is very correct. My students, when I ask them, what do you want to do? They say, I want to improve the state of the world. Fine. Next. What do you want to do after that? So really, okay, next. Big sense of entitlement. This is a generation which is very demanding and intrusive. They will come to your company, they will come to your organization, and they say, I want to know what's happening. I want to have the information. And you tell them it's confidential, they say, I don't understand. Nothing is confidential. WikiLeaks is our hero. And they will certainly agree with Mark Twain, who had a sense of transparency and said one day, you know, never do wrong. And then he added, especially when somebody is looking. And today we are in a world where everybody is looking. So this is very bad. And the last one is that they have a sense of ownership which is completely different. This is a sharing economy. They believe that free is cool, which is a drama. Free is cool. And when you are looking at an illustration of that, this is since we are at the film festival in Cannes now, I found this one. The little guy who is telling to his star, you know, I love your movies. I have pirated them all. And this is exactly the way they behave. You know, they think it is normal. So I try to teach my students that there is no free lunch, that sooner or later somebody has to pay for it. And the best definition I could find was given by Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, who said one day the following, if you think that a product is free, then you are the product. It's a very profound statement because freedom and private sphere, privacy, are the trade-off. You have to find out what do you want, to have it free or to have your privacy being invaded. The other thing which is important with technology and this generation is that they are pushing the older generation into technology. The people of Facebook told me that 33% of the users today are older than 45 years old. Why? Because you send an email to your children and you say, did you receive my email? They say, no, I don't read emails anymore. What do you are? Oh, I am on WhatsApp, I am on this or that, and you'll go on WhatsApp and the rest. They are pushing us into the new technology. And you get this little kid who is telling his teacher the following: how can I trust your information when you are using such an outdated technology? Technology is part of the credibility. And this is what we need to have more. So how come that those little angels went into being? And we are the responsible one. The vintage generation of 1968, for some of us, was characterized, one, by freedom. We wanted to have more freedom, and the other one by guilt. Am I doing enough? And they are playing very well the two things in one generation against the other one. Very clever negotiators. And this has an impact on companies. It has an impact on companies because companies have to manage this evolution and this change in the value system. Now, everybody in a company starts as a tiger. It means you are working hard. You are working more than 60 hours per week. You are very mobile in the company. You are ready to kill everything that moves. Work and success is your priority. And once upon a time, you get married, you get a house, you get a mortgage, you get children, and suddenly you transform yourself into a cat. And the cat still is very committed, very mobile, like all the cats, but the weekends he wants to go back home. And he wants to have work-life balance. And after many, many years, there is another transformation that occurs into the company, and it is that you transform yourself into a dinosaur, where basically you tell the people, don't tell me anymore about the strategy of the company, I don't care. Just let me out at 5 o'clock at night. That's all. And this evolution, you cannot try to fight it. You have to manage it. Now, of course, I have some of my very clever students, they tell me, Prof, if the name of the game is to become one day a dinosaur, why don't I gain time and start immediately as a dinosaur? I say, no, it doesn't work that well. But imagine, you are giving a promotion to a young one who is successful, and he is a cat already, and then you tell him, good news, you have been promoted in Turkmenistan. You say, what? Yes, it's a good news. With this promotion, you are going to be able one day to become president of the company. And then he goes back home and he tells his spouse, I have been promoted. Good. Where? Turkmenistan. Goodbye. What do I do with the children? What do I do with the house? What do I do with the mortgage? What do I do with the dog, the canary, and everything? What will he do? He will refuse the promotion and he will leave the company. You have to manage this evolution and consider that some people change their mindset. And that means the following, according to Peter Drucker, today's change in society have a deeper impact on companies than change in management. In management technique, we haven't learned much in the past 20 years. The biggest challenges to companies comes from changes in society. And that's what we have to adapt. Technology, changing mindset, is the name of the game. We have to make sure that the leadership is a new type of leadership. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt was saying a good leader cannot go too far from followers. And I think this is very true. I have seen so many CEO leaders saying to everybody, I lead. And everybody in the room says, congratulations, goodbye, tell us if it works. Leadership is about creating followers and nothing else. Leadership is about, and this is Shakespeare, understanding the others. Falstaff is saying to the king, if you want to lead people, you have to go to enter their world. And we don't enter enough the world of people in front of us. We believe they are like us. They may not be like us. We need also to understand very well what Albert Einstein was saying. One day, he became finally a professor, and he had a very bad habit. Every single exam, he was asking the same questions, which is a good way to become very popular with your students. However, his assistant came and said, you know, Professor Einstein, you realize that, you know, every exam you have the same questions. And Einstein had this beautiful answer. He says, the questions are the same, maybe, but the answers today are different. And I think it's beautiful because this is exactly the world in which we are today. It seems the questions are the same, but we have to find different answers from in the past. So let me conclude with two things. Number one, in economics, beware of what we call the law of unexpected or unintended consequences. Example, Delhi under British colonial times had one big problem. There had too many cobra snakes in the street. So what have the city hall done to solve this problem? They say, okay, we are going to give a reward to everybody that would come to the city hall with the head of a cobra snake. Very good. The problem is the following. Since Indian people are very clever people, what have they done? They start raising cobra snakes at home. Cut the head, goes to City Hall and say, please, boom, can I have some money? And after a certain time, then they say, we cannot cope with the situation. So City Hall say, I stop the scheme, I stop the reward. So what happened? All the Indians, they put the snakes back in the street. And at the end, you have more snakes in the street than at the beginning. And this is the law of unintended consequences. You have that all over the place in economics, and you have to take care with it. And let me conclude by just underlying. Everything is about change. You all know about that. So two things. Number one, it is about quality change and not any kind of change. Quality change, keep in mind the Neanderthal had a brain bigger than our brain. Are we more or less intelligent than the Neanderthal? I let you answer. But they had a bigger brain. And the second extraordinary thing is ongoing change. Change is taking place all the time. Keep in mind that most of your body cells are renewed within 3 years. Within 3 years, most of your body cells have changed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very good news because it means the following. If you have made a mistake more than 3 years ago, you are not responsible anymore. Was somebody else. Good luck. Thank you.
Brilliant. Great.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes, we love that. Fantastic. Fantastic. We've got time for one question.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yes. Bill Gates suggests that humans should not compete with robots, but focus on jobs where empathy is needed. Do you agree?
Of course.
Of course.
No, I mean, he's right. The real story is not robots or not robots. It's the interaction between technology and human beings. It's whether robots are going to be able to understand us, whether we are going to be able to understand robots, and this is the two together. And that's where the real problem will come, the interaction between the two. But again, I don't think we should believe that at the end of the day, it will not be an issue of people to people. I mean, the robot will help, the robot will do a lot of jobs, but I think nothing will replace the human interaction between people. Thanks God, otherwise what are we doing?
You talked about the law of unintended consequences.
Yes.
Fantastic story about the snakes and Great, brilliant. What do you think is today's biggest unintended consequence?
President Trump?
Fantastic. Are you a tiger, cat, or dinosaur?
A dinosaur, of course.
Come on.
Nah, the dinosaurs are very valuable. They are the only ones who have the memory of the organization. They know what has happened before. They know where people come from. They know everything. And sometimes you tell the dinosaurs, okay, you are, they know a lot of things. You know the learning organization? This is a joke. Organization and companies are never learning. Every time you have a new CEO, he wants to reinvent the wheel. He wants to reproduce something which did not happen before. Sometimes the dinosaur that says, stop, we tried it didn't work, it's not that way, etc. I think the three of them are very valuable. The key issue is to make sure that they are in the right job in the company. You don't put a dinosaur into a job where you need to open new markets and travel around the world. You don't put a cat also in these things. You need to make sure they are in the right position, that's all. But the three are needed.
And one final thing, based on something very important you said, of course, if you just turn around.
Yes, sir.
We're going to take a selfie. Great. A big round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you.